Hey everyone, this is Bill Krieger from the Veterans Archives podcast, where we preserve and share the incredible stories of our nation's heroes. Catch us every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern on Wreaths Across America Radio, or stream anytime on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Really, anywhere you choose to get your podcast, you should be able to find us. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on social media to help us reach more veterans and supporters. We're a nonprofit, and this service is completely free for veterans. Every story matters, and every voice deserves to be heard. Spread the word, honor our heroes, and join us on this mission. Follow, share, and tune in, because their story should never be forgotten. Learn more at veteransarchives.org. We'll see you there. Good morning. Today is Wednesday, February 25th, 2026. We're talking with Adam Hollier, who is serving in the United States Army Reserve. So good morning, Adam.
Morning, Bill.
It's great to see you again.
Yeah, I'm excited to be doing this in person.
All right. Well, let's just dive right in then. The first question I always ask is, when and where were you born?
So I was born in Detroit at Hutzel Hospital. I grew up literally 2 blocks from here. We're at my home here in Detroit. My parents still live in the house I was raised in, but grew up in Detroit. My parents still live in that same house, and we live a whopping 2 blocks from them. So I've gone really far, and yeah.
Well, it's got to come in handy with kids and things, right?
You know, when my wife and I first got married, she was like, wow, your family is here a lot. But that was because we bought an old house and we were here fixing it up and getting it ready. And so they were all very handy and involved. And then so that before we had kids, it was like, oh, family a lot. Once we have kids, like my kids are at my parents' house 2 nights a week. And my sister is the best auntie babysitter in the whole wide world. So it's great having family right around the corner.
Oh, yeah, I can only imagine. So let's talk a little bit about growing up then. So clearly you grew up right here in Detroit. Mm-hmm. And you had brothers, sisters?
Yeah, so I have 3 siblings. So my older brother is 11 years older than me. He is a retired firefighter and DJ extraordinaire, so has traveled with every musical person you know, from Parliament to Eminem to Rihanna, just everybody. And is a musical ambassador with the State Department. And you're like, oh, is that a real job? And it's like, yes, apparently it is. My older sister is a postal inspector. She's 9 years older than me, and she's a polygraph operator. So she is actually checking to make sure you're telling the truth or not.
So no lying to your sister, right?
No lying. But luckily, that one and I are the closest, right? And then I have a little sister who's the one who still lives in the neighborhood, and she's 4 years younger than me. She's an administrator for DPS.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so I went to FLIX, which is the Foreign Language Immersion and Cultural Studies School. When I went to elementary school, it was right here in the neighborhood. It's since moved further west. So I went to Hollier for middle school and Renaissance for high school. And a year after I graduated from Renaissance, they built a new building, and my elementary school moved into my old building. So my elementary school is in the building that I went to high school in.
That's really interesting, and here's why. So I grew up in Lansing. I went to Pattongill Junior High and Eastern High School. Well, they since torn down both of those buildings, and then Pattongill had moved to a brand new building, and then when they rebuilt Eastern moved into Pattongill's building, and Pattongill moved into my old grade school. So it's like the whole shuffle. The names are all the same, though.
Yeah, that's really what happened for me. So it's funny when you talk generationally with folks. I went to Renaissance in the building that was previously Catholic Central. So there are folks who were like, oh, we went to this, we went to different schools, but in the same building.
Yeah. Yeah, I know how that goes. Well, so let's talk about growing up. So you were kind of the middle-ish child,
Yeah, so
right?
I like to say that I'm a middle eldest child because my parents really had 2 sets of children.
Yeah.
But it was cool growing up in that way, in that I got the oldest vibes because, it's just me and my little sister in a lot of ways. But middle children because my family's super close. So we've always been very close, very involved in doing those kind of things. But I had older siblings who were in college when I was, middle school, formative years. So I got to go visit them up at school. My brother was at Eastern, my sister was at U of M, and got to do the take your, siblings come spend the weekend type stuff. And so that was always super cool. But also my younger sister and I were close enough together that in elementary school and middle school and high school, we had teachers in common, but not so close that teachers got us back to back. So, after elementary school, we were never physically in school at the same time.
Right.
But people still knew her through me because, if you see an Hollier, we're related.
I haven't met a ton of Holliers in my
Yeah.
lifetime.
If you see one, we're related.
Right.
Right. Like they're
Right.
not, there aren't any, too many outside, or at least in the US that we're not related to.
So I'm curious, when you went to school and had a teacher that one of your siblings had prior, did you ever have like the old, oh, you're so-and-so's brother, or was it always like a good experience?
Yeah, so it didn't happen for me until high school because my siblings are so much older than me. My little sister obviously got a ton of, oh, you're Adam's sister.
Right.
But my chemistry teacher in high school was one of my brother's teachers that he had in high school. And it's super funny because for him, she was the like new hot teacher. And I was like, Miss Bridget? Because, she was like doing her student teaching when
Right.
he first started. So, she was probably 4 or 5 years, 5 or 6 years older than him. And she was a whole adult to us. And,
Right.
now we think about, I think about it and I'm like, I'm close to the age, I'm about the age that she was as my teacher. And I thought about her as this like very adult person. And so it's kind of a funny thing, but my older sister and I are the more serious ones. My older brother and little sister are the fun ones. So anybody who had Carl and me, I'm the serious one. I'm the more studious one. So I got that. So Lauren got a little bit, I think, a tougher time because I was the serious student and she was much more of an artist.
Oh boy. Yeah, so they're expecting the next Hollier to be that serious student.
Yeah, and
Didn't happen.
all of them are doing the right thing and doing all this
Yeah.
kind of thing. So not too much, but certainly we're all very different kinds of kids and very different kinds of people.
So talk to me about mom and dad while you're growing up. Like, what was it like?
Yeah,
What were they doing?
I have the very best parents to ever parent. Like, so I mean, everybody, maybe not everybody, but I think a lot of people like to think that their parents are awesome. And I think mine definitely was. My dad was a Detroit firefighter. He joined the fire department while my mom was pregnant with me. He had previously been an EMT and transferred to firefighting. My mom was a retired social worker. So she had worked with the YWCA and done, worked for the state and all those kind of things. And shortly after having my little sister, she stopped working and stayed at home, which was great. And you never realize just how cool that is because she planned field trips. And coolest thing is she made my lunch every day of school from kindergarten through high school. And it was great. And she'd put a little note in my lunch of like positive affirmations or like do things. And so it was super cool. When I was in 5th grade, she planned a trip for us to go to Africa. And so we spent 3 weeks living with a host family in Senegal and the Gambia. And she took the school trip. And then in 6th grade, she did a similar thing for us to go to Venezuela. So I lived with a host family in Venezuela. And that was one of those really cool experiences. And I always kind of chuckle to myself of how I lived in a country today that we could not go visit. And at the time, they were one of our closest allies and all these other kind of things. But we had 2 teachers, because Flicks is a foreign language school, so all of my classes were in Spanish. And so the 2 teachers that we were thinking about planning this trip, one was Cuban and one was Venezuelan. And we could not go to Cuba for obvious reasons.
Right.
And so the Venezuelan instructor, his brother was a teacher and worked at a school and all this kind of stuff. So we were able to make that work and kind of chuckle about how different that would be if we were kids today and how, we went to Venezuela because it was super safe and secure and we were such great allies. And now it's like, oh, well, that's a very different experience.
The world has changed. That's very cool though. Like you've got the like what I consider like the truly American upbringing, right? But you also got to experience other cultures all at the same time. What a great way to grow up.
Yeah, I don't think I truly appreciated how cool it was to have all of my classes in Spanish. And so from kindergarten through 5th grade, all of my classes were in Spanish except English. And 3rd grade on, science was in English. But, I learned to read in Spanish before I learned to read in English. And I'm actually really lucky that was the case because I had real trouble learning how to read in English that I did not have in Spanish. And so in 3rd grade, when we really started English, I went and met with a reading specialist every week to help me catch up and learn some of those strategies. And I often think that if I had gone to a traditional school where everything was in English, they'd have been like, this kid is maybe not that smart. But because I was being so successful in Spanish, which is a much easier language to learn and to read because it has less rules and all kinds of other stuff, I didn't have those issues. And so I always think that I was really lucky in that regard.
So I'm just curious, why Spanish?
That's what my mom chose. So Flicks taught 3 languages. At the time, they had French, Spanish, and Japanese. Now they also do Chinese. And so, unfortunately, when I went, it was only K through 5. It's now K through 8. But it was, I learned enough Spanish so I could live in a whole other country with a family that I had just met. A really funny story about the difference between translation and understanding. So I was living with a family and we were out to dinner and, we're ordering food. And I said, no come carne rojo, which literally means I don't eat red meat. And so they ordered me well done steak, even though they thought that it was a travesty. And I was trying to explain that I don't eat beef. And they were like, well, of course you don't, because your beef is trash. We wouldn't eat it either. That's a great decision. But our beef is way better. You should, while you're here, you've got to try. And I'm like, no, I don't. I literally don't eat so I've had 1 bite of steak in my entire life while I was in Venezuela.
Was Venezuelan beef good?
I mean, I have no reference points. So I think for me, I was just like, this is not, what is this? This is wrong,
Right.
Versus just delicious. But everyone says that it's better. I think they have more topsoil or something like.
I can only imagine the thought process of the guy cooking that it well done when, people who eat beef know that you just don't cook it well done, or at least that's the general consensus.
Correct. Yeah.
Lots of people eat them well done, but some.
But that's not the right.
Right.
That's not the right answer, as they would say in the Army, right? Like it is an answer. It's just not the right one.
Right.
And so it was a really interesting kind of grow up thing, right? Like I had the kind of parents that you'd have on a TV sitcom, in that my dad was super involved, helped coaching, those kind of things. I played sports from a really young age, from t-ball to baseball to coach pitch to, hardball and soccer early, and started playing football when I was in 8th grade. And so loved it and played football all through high school and college.
So that turned out to be kind of your favorite sport, though?
Yeah. And I couldn't play until, so like I didn't care anything about football. Middle school really made me think about football because I then had friends who were playing football, and I was like, I want to play. My older brother had bad experiences playing football, and so my parents, particularly my mom, was hesitant to let me play. But mostly because my brother is significantly taller than I am, and so he had trouble making weight because he was, 6 feet tall in 6th grade.
Yeah.
So it just was a thing. And obviously I didn't have those same kinds of challenges. But yeah, so soccer was really my first sport of love, but like we didn't have high school soccer in Detroit at the time.
Right.
And so if we did, I probably would have kept playing soccer instead, but that was not an option. And so in 8th grade, I convinced my mom to let me transition to football. It's like, because that's what I'm going to do in high school. So I played football, I ran track, and I did both of those things in college as well.
Okay. So you swapped one football for another football, really?
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, football for football, or football for, yeah.
Yeah, however that works.
Yeah.
So talk to me about middle school and high school. What was that like for you?
It was cool, right? So I was one of those kids who got a chance to go to 3 different sets of schools, which I think is maybe less common nowadays.
Yeah.
Where I think that there are a lot more kind of elementary, K through 8 options for folks. But I went to Hollier. It was a magnet middle school, and so it was supposed to give me the first chance to ride the school bus, because my first school was literally walking distance.
Right.
But then they got rid of school buses, so that kind of sucked. So my parents still had to take me and do all those kind of things. But middle school was cool. I started playing academic games, got a chance to meet kids that were new and different and kind of from all over the city in a way that I think was a little less common at my elementary school. And that was cool, right? And yeah, I started playing football, and that obviously led to lots of football for the next 9 years of my life. And so, yeah, I got involved in like student government and those kind of things. High school was a lot of things. So I was youth governor. I was the citywide student council president. I was the president of the Senate at my high school. And I was a captain on the football team and the track team. I got a chance to really do kind of activities and stuff. But yeah, it was a blast. Like, people often talk about how high school was the best time. I wouldn't say that high school was the best time in my life, but it was a great time, and
Yeah.
I think fondly back about it. And I think being in school that like 90s 2000s was a really cool transition space where technology was changing a lot,
Hmm.
right? Like I got a chance to learn how to type on a typewriter, which no one does anymore, right?
Right. I took typing classes.
Yeah, I mean, but like we had to like I learned how to type on a typewriter,
Yeah.
and the internet was coming in, and they were like, "Well, you can't use the internet as a source to now having." I was on the faculty at Wayne State, and it's like 95% of the material that my students are using is something that they got from the internet. Now, they're pulling journal articles, or they're using their book electronically, or the slides, and those kind of things. But it was a really interesting moment to be in these spaces where they're like, there's this new internet thing and you can make websites and like,
Yeah.
dial up and, CDs going into DVDs, going into MP3 players, going into the technological change of those things and like Y2K. And, it was just, I think it was an interesting moment being what they call an elder millennial. So I was born in 85.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 years after I graduated high school, actually, just so we can put some perspective around that. But absolutely, and I think about that like with even older folks. So my grandmother was born in 1912, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she lived right up through the late 80s, and so you think about all the things that they saw, but then it's the same. Like every generation has that span where things are just changing. Like I don't remember not having the internet. I don't remember not having a cell phone. I mean, I kind of remember those days.
Oh, I absolutely remember. Like, I remember when cell phone, like, I remember the first one, and when the internet became practical. So, like, I was having this conversation with my grandmother, who was born in the early 20s, and she remembers when running water kind of became pervasive, or like, getting paid, a dime to play the piano for someone, and that was music, and like, those things are really interesting because. I have a 8-year-old daughter, and when she was a little kid, she was looking at some DVDs, and she called them DVDs or whatever, because she's like, "Are these books? What are these things?" Right? Like
Right.
no concept of what that technology was. And I remember how big of a deal getting that anti-skip CD was, and like some of those kind of things, or the kind of flash, I think they call them flashbulb moments, of like walking into class and seeing the two towers falling and like seeing 9/11, right? Like I was in high school, and we were planning for homecoming and doing all those kind of things, and I saw this big fire, and I was like, oh, that must, I'm immediately thinking, oh, well, my dad must be there, because if it's a fire on the news, it's probably in the city. And then you're like, oh no, that's in New York. What's going on? And that kind of moment where everybody thinks to themselves, oh, I remember exactly where I was and what I was thinking, and like how we managed that process. And my generation stepped up and was like, all right, I'm going to go sign up and fight this evil in the world. And I think we're just now really reconciling with that fact. When I was in the legislature, one of my colleagues and I, we were the only two members of the legislature still serving. So he was in the National Guard and I was in the reserves, and we were talking about what it was like that we had been going through this war for 20 years.
Yeah.
And it was the longest war we've ever had. And the veterans that we think about having changed and all those kind of things. And at, I don't know, what was I, 15, wasn't thinking, oh, wow, this is going to change the world and our perspective in this kind of very real and meaningful way. And it absolutely did.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting too. That war went on for so long that there were people fighting in that war that didn't experience 9/11, that didn't really know why we were there. I think some people would argue we don't know why we're there anyway, but really, I mean, yeah. And I think every generation again has that something that's happened, maybe not that tragic or traumatic, but something that they remember, that people who grew up when Kennedy was assassinated, and and so on. So every generation has that marker. So you're in high school, and that's when things are really starting to change. If you could think about like one moment in high school, when you think about high school, what's like one thing in your head that just pops up like, that's what I remember about high school?
I mean, I think for me, it was student government. I think that was the thing that I was the most involved in, the most invested. I think getting elected youth governor was really cool, and being able to get to meet people and like go up to the state capitol and like be a part of that. So there's a program called Michigan Youth in Government, and for twice a year, a couple times a year, they literally take over the Capitol. And so you go sit on the Senate floor or on the House floor. You work in these offices, and you get a chance to act like you're going to be there. And that was really cool as a high school student because I got a chance to meet some state legislators. So my son's godfather, Buzz Thomas, is a former state senator. And I met him at the Youth in Government brunch or breakfast or, whatever you want to call it. I just happened to be sitting next to him, and he is a lifelong friend. Like, we talk regularly. He is obviously my son's godfather, gave me my first job, but I met him because I got elected by my peers to be in this position and got a chance to follow him into the legislature. And so I think about those moments of like, wow, how cool is this that there are these people happening. And when I was in the legislature, I got a chance to serve on the board, and students would sit in my seat and leave me a note, and like I'd be able to do the same or like those kind of things. So it was always really cool.
Yeah, that's almost like it's an interesting moment when you're sitting in that seat that you were sitting in previously, right? Like now it's your turn to kind of pass that along or pay it forward or whatever term you want to use for it. So is that really kind of where you got I don't know if the bug is the right word, where you got that, so like, there's something here?
It's funny, my dad set me down when I was about 10 years old and told me that I could never be a firefighter. And that's like a weird conversation to have with your kid, but he'd always say that I didn't have that healthy bit of fear that brought you home at night, that my wife would say I'm a leaper. My in-laws would say that I have an adventure gene. But, I always knew that I wanted to take care of folks. That's what my parents did. My mom's a social worker. She's helping people through that stuff. And my dad literally would run in and go save folks in a real and meaningful way. And so who doesn't want to be a firefighter? And if your dad's a firefighter, like, come on, of course that's a great option. I was killing career Dave, right?
Yeah.
And so, but he was like, in an environment where you have 35 to 50 minutes of air, thinking that you have 5 more minutes that you can do those things, it's not the best space for you. And so he'd always say that I would think that I could just get that, that person was just within reach, that I could do just a little bit more, and that would, that wouldn't bring me home at night, right? And so I promised from then on that I would take care of the people who ran in. And so I saw kind of the structural challenges that my mom dealt with that ultimately made her decide that social work was enough, because you're kind of just, as they say, putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound, right? And it's like, I'm giving you half of a solution when we could solve your problem or help you solve your problem, but that's not the mandate, that's not the task. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. How do we get this work done? And we talk about these kind of flashpoint moments of like, hey, here are these moments that I think make you a whole person. There was the Million Man March that happened, and I was like, wow, this is such a cool thing. I read about it or whatever. And I was like, hey, Dad, we should go. And Dad's like, I'm 10, right? It's like, we are not going, we are not getting on a bus and going to DC with these, whatever.
Right.
And so Dr. Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech in Detroit before he famously gave it in DC. And my dad used to always say that he missed it because he went to a baseball game that day. And so when history is happening, don't miss it.
Right.
Be there. And so I was like, Dad, you said when history is happening, show up. And so he's like,
Parents love nothing more than for their words to come baback.
Yeah. And so,
right. And haunt them.
And so he was like, okay, let me figure this out. And so the Phoenix Firefighters Association, that's the Black firefighters, had a bus. And so I got on the bus with, a million other people from across the country, and my dad, my older brother, and I, and the firefighters went down to DC. And it was one of those experiences that you can't really quantify or explain how involved or invested it is in that way, where you get there and every street you see is just lined and lined and lined with buses everywhere. And it's just black men, right? Like it's just black men everywhere. And you got on the National Mall. Now, I think that was the first time I had ever been there. And so there are people like this to you, right? Like everywhere you go, there are people on top of people. And like every little kid, I'm like, Dad, how do they know that there are a million people? And my dad is also the fire photographer. So he's, very familiar with taking photography and like doing all those kind of things. And so he's like, well, they take aerial images and they can tell, based on how dense it looks and how many people there are and, whatever. I was like, Dad, we should go do this. So I make my dad stand in line at the Washington Monument. And so we stand in this hours long line, right? But I'm like, I don't have anywhere to go, right? We're just listening to the thing. We're like, well, yeah. Stand in line. So we get up to the top and he takes a photo looking down towards the Lincoln Memorial, where you can see towards the Capitol, I'm sorry, looking at the Capitol. So you can see all of the people and you can see how dense people are from the Capitol back to the Washington Monument. And that photo became kind of cool. So like the Firefighters Association gave it to, at the time, Mayor Archer. And Mayor Archer says to, little 10-year-old me, he's like, it's rare that people see a problem and immediately look for a solution. You might want to consider doing this. So here I am, little kid Adam, and the mayor of the city of Detroit is like, hey, you should think about this business I'm in. And I was like, I like that. I like the idea of being able to actually solve these problems, because when we talked about politics in my household, it wasn't who's got, which party or none of that. It was, are people going to have the resources that they need to put food on their table? Mm-hmm. Are they going to be able to move from being in a bad situation to a better situation? Is that firefighter who goes into that building going to have the right equipment to come out? Is there going to be a person who can go in and get them? Is the pump on the truck going to work? Are the hydrants going to work because they've been inspected and maintained? Or are they going to go dead and you have to, use extra line and like all these other kind of things? And so I was like, I want to be that. Like, I want to be the person who makes decisions for people, not for money. And, it also was kind of this weird moment where nobody really trusts government or politicians or any of these kind of things. And so you're like, wait. Okay, so most of the decisions in my life are controlled by these people who we don't trust. That just doesn't make sense to me. Why don't we fix this? And people are like, oh, you can't fix the system. They're all bad. I was like, well, I don't think that's the case. And so I got involved.
So here you are.
So here I am.
So let's talk about graduation from high school. As you graduated from high school, what happens?
Yeah, so it's funny. Even before we get there, I was like, it was figuring out where I was going to go to school. So there was a moment in time where I really thought I was going to go to Annapolis, right? Like I was talking to a retired admiral and, we were communicating regularly. Mm-hmm. And I was of that, kind of 9/11 generation of like, hey, you go and serve and like Top Gun and all this kind of stuff. I wanted to fly and do all this kind of things. Yeah. Yeah. And, they recruited me to play football. And all of a sudden, I didn't hear anything from, like, it just kind of crickets. And I got recruited to play football at Cornell, and the team was going, and, we got through that process. And I ultimately was deciding between Cornell and Columbia and chose Cornell, after my visit and all that kind of stuff. But that thing just kind of popped away. Mm-hmm. And I'll finish that story, but, I joined the Army a week after my 30th birthday. I went to basic training. And when I came back, my mom and my wife were talking about how this happened. Because, the story I like to say is, like, why did you wait so late? I was like, because my wife finally said yes.
Right.
I had kind of been flirting with this thing for many years. And Crystal says it's because she wasn't as good at keeping me out of the military as my mom. And because my mom apparently, that admiral came to the house in his dress whites. And, this is 2002.
Right.
So it's a year after 9/11. And everybody is like, what is going to happen? How is this stuff moving? And my mom is of the Vietnam generation. So officer coming in, all whites, to the house. She was like, she literally had the scar conversation with him. She was like, leave and never return. Do not call, do not email, do not write. And, that was a time where they were calling on the house phone. They were sending physical mail, like all of those. And I guess, tore everything up and blocked all calls. And so it's this kind of funny story of like mom being like, no, this isn't what's going to happen in this moment. And obviously it was the right thing because that's what happened. But it's one of those things where it's like, think about how different my life would have been if that were the case.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, we don't get the opportunity to see what would have been, right? We only see what is.
Yeah.
But I want to ask a question, and I mean this very respectfully.
Yeah.
Was there a point, like, your mom clearly did the right thing, right? But when those things happen, like, maybe that doesn't feel like the right thing. So when you found out about that, how did you feel about that?
I mean, it was fine. It was 10, 15. Yep.
Oh, so it wasn't like fresh.
No, I did not know in real time. And when you're when you're a high school senior, like all of these things are happening, right? You're talking to all these different schools, you're thinking about them, and it was not uncommon, I should say, for one school to be interested for a little while, and you're kind of dating in this thing. And I had good options and stuff was going, and senior year is so busy, right? Like it's playing football and. The other thing that delayed it was I had an injury that delayed my physical for the service academy stuff. Okay. And so it just happened, all those things. And, your parents play a big role in making sure you follow up on all the things that you're supposed to follow up on. And when you get a delay, and I think there are a lot of other ways that they manage through those other processes. And so it was one of those things where it was just kind of a funny story with my mom and my wife, and like, because I also, all through college, kind of continued to flirt with this idea. So I'd be up, talking to a recruiter, hey, what does this look like? How do we, do these kind of things? And my senior year in college, I needed like 2 credits to graduate. So I took a bunch of ROTC courses just for the, I took mountaineering and marksmanship and military history and some of those kind of things. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll join after graduation, and this is 2007. So kind of height of the troop surge and, all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, hey, I think this would be a good fit. And so my wife and I had just started dating, and I was talking to her about it. And she was like, yeah, if you do that, we probably won't keep dating. And so I was like, oh, I think she's the one. It's probably not. And grad school's already paid for and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, I guess, okay, sure. I think if I had known about the reserves or the guard when I was younger, I would have done it. I want to say I know I would have done it sooner. But like it's just hindsight, as they say, is 20/20.
Right.
And there was so much going on between high school and college and getting ready and doing all those other kind of things. Because I played football, I ran track, and so that recruitment process is it's a very real and meaningful thing, and getting on campus and doing those kind of stuff. And so a lot going on.
Now, what did you study at Cornell?
Got my bachelor's in industrial and labor relations with a focus on organizational development and change.
Okay.
And so you're like, well, still, what did you study?
Well, it's funny because my master's is in organizational leadership.
Oh, really?
So
yeah,
people ask me and I still can't explain it. But
yeah, so I like to tell folks that I thought about how people work.
Yeah.
And how they become more productive and how organizations change and work. And so I knew that was going to be really important in the work that I did. And I think it's served me really well.
Yeah. Now, where did you go on for your master's?
So I have a master's from the University of Michigan in urban planning, and I focused on economic development there. And so I've gotten a chance to do a lot of, I've never been a planner, but I've done a lot of work in planning, particularly in the economic development and real estate space. And so that's been super cool. So I've gotten a chance to work on a bunch of projects that, if I'm driving around town, I'm like, I helped negotiate the tax credit for this project. So, whenever I, drive past the Broderick Towers or go into the Argonaut building where the College for Creative Studies is, some of those things, I'm like, hey, I helped make this project work.
That's pretty cool.
It is.
Leaving your mark on society, right?
It is, I mean, there's no Adam placard, but it's cool to know that I was a part of making that deal work.
It's too bad they don't have like a placard that's got all the names of the people that helped put it together, right?
That'll be an interesting thing. Yeah, that would be cool.
Because a lot of times when they build a building, right, you have the architect's firm, who the architect was, who the board of directors were at the time and all that.
People paid for it.
Yeah, exactly. So the whole time you're going to Cornell and you're going to U of M, are you dating your wife at this
So
time?
my wife and I started dating my senior year in college. So we like to when we celebrate our anniversary, it's January 4th of 2007.
Uh-huh.
And so most people are like, I'm like, yeah, we've been together for, almost 20 years.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, I was at your wedding. You got married in 2011. I was like, yeah. But like the day we celebrate, so like, we would say we've been together for 19 years, no pauses, no breaks.
Yeah.
And that can be confusing for folks because for most people, it's the wedding anniversary that matters most to them.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, it's that day.
Right.
And so that's a kind of fun.
I love that.
Yeah.
I do. That's a real relationship.
Yeah. So that's the anniversary that we actually think about and celebrate. October is the like, hey, what'd you guys do for your anniversary? We said I love you.
Yeah, right.
For January, it's like,
yeah, we went to Hawaii or we did something, right?
Yeah. So it's actually funny because a good friend of mine on his 40th, we traveled with him to celebrate his 40th, and it happened to be during our time. And we kind of did this kind of unique impromptu kind of like renewal type thing just because we were at a spot and we're talking about it. So it's fun times.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So did she follow on to U of M with you?
No, so we weren't actually in the same space until we got married. So Crystal went to Yale undergrad. She's a couple of years older than me, and then went to MSU for graduate school. So she has a master's and a PhD in clinical psychology. And so while I was when I graduated from Cornell, she had finished her master's at MSU. And while I was at U of M getting my master's, she was finishing up her PhD. And so then she did her clinical internship the year of our engagement. So we got engaged in October 10th of 2010. And then I had a year or so to get this house to a habitable state right before we got married. So that was the deal. We bought this very much so of a fixer-upper. Like when we walked people into the house, they were like, have you ever seen the movie The Money Pit? And I was like, yes, I have. And so literally the only people who thought that this was a good investment were my parents. My parents and my siblings. Everyone else was like, you're 25. What are you taking on? Like, this is crazy. Because, now people come in and they look at the house and they're like, oh, it looks great. But back then they were like, and so, she's been very gracious to have been with me and let me take on these ridiculous projects.
Well, and I just want to put some context around this, right? So before this interview, you and I were talking about this house, and it wasn't just a fixer-upper. There was like no pipe, no wire.
No,
like,
I mean, so
like anything that could be carried away had been carried away.
Yeah, I always say no doorknobs, no light fixtures. Anything you and your 3 strongest friends could take in 4 hours was taken, right? So that was also, 2010. So Detroit was going through, the mortgage foreclosure crisis. The country was dealing with it. Detroit was one of the communities that was hit the hardest, and scrapping and like all of those things were going on in the context of that moment. And so, as we talked about every generation having their thing, I'm a millennial, so we were like, we had 9/11, and we had the housing, we had the Great Recession, and
Yeah, yay us.
And so, we had the stock market crash. We had now I think we're dealing with AI technology. And so it's been a whole thing of like housing. I think it has been a really unique moment for people my age where, when I got a chance to run the Veterans Affairs Agency, we would be, I talked to all of these veterans who, they got in the military, and that gave them the opportunity to buy a house, to do some of these kind of things that I think younger veterans are still struggling to do and trying to manage as they understand the benefits and the cost, because these programs were never designed for a $300,000 or $400,000 house as your starter, but it's like, those are the only houses that exist, right? Like, you can't buy a $150,000, $200,000 starter home that qualifies because of all the things. So it's just been a really interesting ride.
Yeah. Now I want to back up because you talked about getting engaged in 2010 and getting married in 2011. But one thing that I don't think we really covered was, how did you meet your wife?
So my wife and I actually met the summer before I started high school in 1999.
Okay.
So her father was my ophthalmologist, and so she was working at the reception desk. And I came out with my eyes all dilated and could literally only see her in focus. And I was like, wow, this is a gorgeous woman here. And she, as quickly or succinctly as she could, pop that bubble. She was going to be a junior and I was going to be a freshman. She was like, hey, little kid, like, what's up?
Right.
And so she would say, I thought he was cute, but, hook him up with, maybe a JV cheerleader because I'm varsity is how she likes to describe that story. But we didn't date at all in high school, and we didn't really date until my senior year in college.
Now, did you still like communicate in high school?
Yeah,
You're
so
like on a friendly level?
So in high school, we had lots of friends in common. My cousin was one of her best friends. We did, she was a cheerleader. I was on the football team. Like, we did things in common. We interacted, but just completely as friends. And Yale was actually my number one choice for schools. I applied early, but I got waitlisted. And so she also chuckles sometimes that if we had gone to school together, we probably wouldn't be together. And so I'm a firm believer that, things happen the way they're supposed to. And sometimes the blessing that you got is that the thing you wanted doesn't happen, right? Like there's a country song about unanswered prayers.
Yes.
And I'm a firm believer that that is the case and has been the case in my life. Sometimes you take your lumps, but it is all to the good as long as, you continue to do the stuff that you have to do. So her parents every year had a party that started out as, there just aren't that many Black kids who go to Ivy League schools, certainly out of Detroit. Right. So they had a party for folks who did, so that they got a chance to get to know each other. And then it became people who went to East Coast schools, and then, kind of who went away. Because, a third or so of the people I graduated went to the University of Michigan. And if you add Michigan State, you're probably at 45, 50, 60%, and, in-state. So you have a lot of folks in that space versus, one or two kids who are going to an Ivy League school. And from the city, it's probably 5, 6, 10, not a huge number. And so it was just a chance to get to know each other. And so we would go to, a little Christmas party every year. And senior year, I asked her out and she said yes. I always say that it's because she gave me a look as she handed me my coat. She always disputes that there was a look, but I was like, because of the look, I asked you out. And she was like, well, I'm glad. She said she's glad that I thought I saw something, right, even though there was no look. But, we went out. She said yes. And I asked her out every day while we were together. I was like, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? And she's like, oh, well, I've got evening plans. So I was like, well, what are you doing for lunch? And so, when I skate, and while we're at the thing, I was like, what are you doing tomorrow? I was like, well, I've got day plans. Like, all right, what are you doing in the evening? And so we were together every day while I was at home on break until I had to leave. And then I asked her to be my girlfriend then. And so that's that January 4th, 2007 date.
Wow. So you talk about taking your time, right? 8 years really of knowing each other before making it somewhat of, what do we call it now? Facebook official. But yeah.
Oh yeah. And honestly, that was a thing that was really a thing at the time. So like we were, I had been on Facebook since it was invented, right? Yeah. And it was, early Facebook, it was like, that was when it was really a thing because it was telling the world, it's like, no, we're really a thing.
Yeah. So you go off to really separate schools, but still beating the odds because really long distance relationships don't always work out like we think they're going to.
Yeah, I always think that's funny because I think the reality is most relationships don't work out. And so when we think about long distance relationships, I just think they happen faster, right? Like they're on a more accelerated timeline, right? Because either that the person is it, or that they don't, because you're not willing to work as hard for someone. It's more work to plan to hang out with someone when you guys have to be on the phone or like to call or like do those kind of things versus, are you around? Cool. We just hang out. And like, I think the deliberateness of it is impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the way you put that because that thing was going to crash and burn. It just crashed and burned quicker because of the distance. So, did you guys graduate then completely from college right around the same time?
So I got my bachelor's when she got her master's in 2007. She graduated from undergrad in 2005 and got her PhD in 2011, right as we got married.
Okay.
Or right before we got married. And so she had to do her clinical internship at the University of Rochester. She did that the year before we got married. So she went away to Rochester and I stayed here and started getting this house into a habitable space. So I graduated, I got engaged, and then I had a year where I was working in the legislature. I was Senator Johnson's chief of staff, and at night I was fixing this place up. So like I had to scrape the paint off the wood and like doing all these other kind of things in here and like painting and patching and plastering it and doing all those things.
So you weren't getting a lot of sleep at this time.
I didn't have kids, so before you
true.
have kids, you realize just how much time you have to do stuff, and then you have kids, and you're like, why don't I have time to? It's like you don't have any more time, you don't get as much sleep, and you don't have as much money.
Right. Speaking from experience, though, they're in and out pretty quick. So enjoy it. Enjoy that lack of time.
I'm doing my best. We're trying to do deliberate things with the kiddos.
Absolutely. So graduation happens. You're getting ready to get married, and you're working at the legislature.
Yeah, I was working at the legislature.
So talk me through so what's next? What happens next?
Yeah, so it was a really wild time working in the legislature, right? So there was a government shutdown at the in the state level. We Democrats were in the majority when my boss and I were working in the House, and then he runs for election to the state Senate. He wins, and they're in the minority in the Senate for literally the first time Dems have been in the majority in the Senate is this term right now in my entire lifetime. So over that 40 years.
So we'd say forever.
Yeah. So but it was really interesting going from being in the minority or being in the majority to the minority and working on a lot of stuff. So like as a state senator, I got in the legislature as a staffer, I got a chance to work on the regional transit authority legislation. And my boss really empowered me to let me do that work and take the lead. So we got a chance to get that done and made really cool relationships with the UP reps and senators. And, those lasted all through my tenure in the legislature because, we have so much in common and had been historically good friends. And so it was cool. And so I did that for a couple of years. I ran for state rep unsuccessfully. And then Mayor Bing asked me to come join his administration. And I was the liaison between the mayor's office and the city council. Had a little bit of time where I got a chance to coach some Little League football, and I got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and just was having the best time. It's like we talk about things that you can do when you're single. You can go to the gym 4 or 5 days a week and like just get after it. And so that was super cool. And, I went down to the city when they were dealing with a really wild times, right? So the city was going through went through that entire bankruptcy process. So I got a chance to go through and help them try and avoid it. And then when it came, how to manage through that process. And so it was a really interesting time being in the city and helping folks manage and navigate what was going to be this very interesting transition as Mayor Bing ceded to Mayor Duggan and the kind of change that we've seen over that time.
And what terrific experience, right? I mean, I think sometimes that adversity really allows us to learn a lot.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and the city had so many things going on, right? Like I got a chance to learn every department in the city, right? From building and safety to the assessor's office to any number of these places. And so, today when people are like, hey, do you know anybody? It's like, yeah, I know somebody over so-and-so. What do you need? And they're like, well, I've been trying to catch up with this. I was like, oh yeah, I know them. I'll call them right now. Hey man, can you do so-and-so? So like the head assessor for the city of Detroit is a Marine. And Alvin and I we're talking through things, and I didn't know anything about that process, but assessment values are a big issue in the city of Detroit because, you had these houses where the value literally fell away 2008, 9, 10, 11. And there was this big issue with assessments. The challenge, though, for cities is because of Proposal A, if your property is worth $100,000 and then the value drops to 20, you reassess to 20. The city's never going to be able to recoup that thing as long as you stay in the home because it can only go up 1% or the rate of inflation, whichever is smaller.
Right.
And so, you get people who buy at the bottom of the market, get their property reassessed. And so instead of, $1 million house paying taxes on $1 million are paying taxes on 100 or 150 or 200. And so it just presents a lot of really unique challenges that don't normally come up except in these, shocks to the system.
Right.
That the city had all the shocks at exactly the same time. And you're like, how do you navigate these things? And so it was with building these relationships and getting with folks.
Well, and fiscal planning doesn't happen in that year, right? Fiscal planning is a 5 or 10 year projection. And so I can imagine these cities who ended up losing all that revenue. I mean, that now what do you do? Because you pretty much planned on how you're going to spend that money.
Yeah, and
now you don't even have it.
And you can never get it back.
No.
And like that also, it also is the challenge from an equity standpoint that people are talking about that, lost their homes or had to manage a process because they were like, well, my house was overvalued for these things that was paying tax. You're living in a house that you could only sell for 20 that the city is saying is worth 100 and you lose it because you can't sell it and the taxes are too. So like, it was just a really complicated thing, but I got a chance to meet all these people who were being squeezed and had the opportunity to help them navigate some of those kind of things and convey that to the public or work with the council members or do some of those kind of things. And so it was a really cool kind of early career opportunity that, you just can't replace.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is not really part of the discussion, but you said something interesting. So when they reevaluate those properties because they've sold and they're at this lower taxation rate, you said, well, the city will never recoup that. And it reminds me of people who say, once a tax is implemented, it never goes away. So you've got those, it's like that tension, right? Those two things trying to work together because people don't want their taxes to go up because they know they're never going to go down.
Yeah.
They've had this opportunity for them to go down. They want to take that opportunity, but they don't think about what that funds and what those resources are.
Yeah, because you look at a neighborhood, and so the way the city was also trying to manage, what revenue looked like and how to understand those things. But every block in the city of Detroit or any city is supposed to generate roughly the same amount of revenue, right? And so that's why you have 100 houses on one block and 10 houses on another block and maybe one on another block. And so, but ostensibly each one of those should be bringing in $100. And if you have that neighborhood with 100 houses, each one's paying $1 in taxes, or the 10, each one's paying 10, or the one's one. But you go to a space where now of those 100 houses, only 5 of the, 50 of them are paying. Well, now you're collecting $50 instead of 100. That's a huge impact. And if of those 50, now you say, oh, well, they're not worth what they were worth before. So now of the 50 people who are paying, you're only collecting, instead of $50 from them, you're collecting $20 from them. That block that needed $100 worth of services is now getting $20 worth of revenue. And because it's only getting $20 worth of revenue, it's harder to service that block. And people are moving out and unwilling to make the kind of investment. So it really snowballs into some of the challenges that you have, where you have another block where those 10 people are still paying their $10 each, and their block is collecting, $90 instead of 100. And they're like, well, you're spending my money over there and they're not paying, and so it really gets into this very complicated set of circumstances that I think when we think about government, it's hard for folks to understand, like military folks, when they're like, lowest bidder won this contract, and you're a person who is looking through the budget and you're like, but the military budget is so big, how do they spend money on whatever? And you're like, well, that windshield has to be ballistic glass. It's not just glass.
Right.
Like
the windshield.
Those tires have to be able to handle this, not that. And you may be able to drive your tires for 4 years, but we're only going to get a year out of those tires. And like it's managing all of those different things that I think gives you a lot of unique perspective in these jobs.
Yeah. So you're working for the mayor's office, and then where do you go from there?
Yeah, so then I left the mayor's office when Mayor Bing's term ended, and I went over to Hance Woodlands. And so it was this really interesting project where John bought 1,500 parcels over on the Lower East Side of the city of Detroit in a 1 square mile area, with the idea that if you bought the city-owned property, and the city-owned property was property that people had lost to tax foreclosure and stuff like that. So this was never meant to be public land, right? This is no parks. This is just, you had a house that got demolished and now it's a vacant lot in a neighborhood. And, cut the grass, cleaned them up, demolished 50 structures, and try and stabilize the neighborhood by planting 15,000 trees. And so had a long-term development agreement, and I was tasked with managing that relationship with the city. And so it was a really, interesting thing of getting to go be in community and go knock doors and talk to folks and say, hey, how do you see this thing? Because the public perception was really negative about it. But you go talk to that lady and you're like, all right, we're going to demolish this house that's been vacant for 20 years, or these 20 lots that the grass is this high and the rats and all this kind of stuff. We're going to clear that, and you're going to look out on nice, clear, mowed yard. And hey, you're going to see these very nice maple trees. And maybe one day we'll make maple syrup out of these things, or you'll see, an orchard that people come in and get to go take their graduation or wedding photos, the kind of things that you see in other places.
Right.
But most importantly, it's going to stabilize this neighborhood. And we've seen, the result of that, where property values in the neighborhood have gone up significantly, and people have decided to move into that community, and investments around it have continued to grow. And so I've always felt that was such a cool thing.
Now, I'm curious, you were talking about the tree planting. Is that, do you guys work with Greenstone Farm Credit Services?
Yeah, so Greenstone came down and they planted a whole section. We're a big supporter and a big sponsor. So I got a chance to meet the whole team. And I had never heard of Greenstone before then, but it was super cool.
Yeah, because they're, I think it's Pete.
Pete Limmer.
Yeah, Pete comes down every year. He loves it. Like, it's his big thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I planned that first tree plant day, and Greenstone had a bunch of folks, and we have all these photos, and yeah, it was a great time.
That's awesome. Yeah. So when you started talking about things, I've heard about this because I've talked to Pete.
Yeah. So it was really important for me that we had volunteers do this, so people had ownership. And so it was funny because before we started and while we were in the planning process, people were like, oh, this rich guy just wants people to come and plant these trees. I was like, no, it's more expensive for us to have volunteers do this than it would have been for us to just go out and do them.
Right.
But we got the benefit of people having this investment in this cool day. And so for years we did tree planting day, and it was like, you plant all these trees, and it was this incredible logistical, thing of having 1,500 or so people out to come plant trees on a Saturday in Detroit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of cool and exciting. Like I see in Chicago where they're doing the urban farming too, which I think is interesting. And there's some places that actually are putting up like horse stables and just all kinds of things where you wouldn't think they would put them.
And the city of Detroit is doing those things. Detroit has one of the most robust urban agriculture programs and communities in the country. And they just opened the Detroit People's Food Co-op just down the street from here, and, got a chance to work with Malika Keeney and the food sovereignty in the space. And they're even building a horse stable, Detroit Horsepower, here in the city of Detroit. So it was really cool to be early in so many of those changes that were going on.
Yeah. And I mean, to think about it, like, where I live, the farmer's market's very common, but you're talking about growing your own food right here in the city.
Yeah.
And you're not trucking it somewhere, like it's right there. What a great way to start curbing some of the issues you have with being able to buy healthy food.
Yeah, I think the cool thing about urban agriculture is it is an empowerment issue, and it is a thing that is scaling up. It is, I think people have to be cautious about it being the solution to food thing, right? Like, we live in Michigan. There are only so many things that you can grow here.
Right.
And those things, you can grow spinach and kale and the leafy greens grow really well here. Fruit is a little bit harder, here, but people still do some of those kind of things. I think the coolest part is having that degree of control and being able to supplement in that kind of real and meaningful way, right? Like going back to World War II, and we had our first set of propaganda around our victory gardens, and but that was because housing, food stability, and so it's giving people a little bit of control over that. That's really important, and I think building the ecosystem around that work so that you could take those things and make them into products, right? So you could take your tomatoes and make salsa. You can take those things and make them into a finished good that you can sell to a local restaurant and a thing like that. And I think that's really where the space has gone most successful.
Now, do you see that as like part of the answer to the food desert, where you don't have grocery stores in certain areas?
I think everything is a part of that answer. So it is about like fighting on every front and getting getting a little bit closer. Like, is this going to make people who are eating, all processed foods not eat all processed foods? No. But the Double Up Food Bucks program, which meant that your dollar of EBT was worth $2 if you're buying produce or local road things, that helps make the volume make sense and doing those kind of things, allowing folks to have the technology to be able to take those at farmers markets. So when I was a staffer, we worked on, they had these like wooden token things that you could take to a farmers market and they would collect those, because you couldn't just, the farmers market didn't have the ability to take a credit card or your bridge card or things like that early on. I mean, now technology has changed, so everybody is, tapping, swiping, and doing all those other kind of things. But it was really figuring out the logistics on making those things work that allowed people to participate. And I think we're just continuing to tighten that up.
And I remember as a kid, it was like almost like a grocery store where you would go and get like, you get everything was in like plain tin cans with black writing on it, and you got your government cheese and your canned goods, and honestly all that food that you probably shouldn't have been eating, but it was food.
Yeah.
And it got you through. So yeah, I mean, what a great change. So how long were you part of that?
So I was there for 2 years. I think that's right. And so I left there to go to basic training. Literally, my wife and I, we do kind of vision boarding, planning. At the time, it was just vision boarding. Yeah. Now it's more, involved planning. But, we were going through, and it was like on my list of things to do, serving was really high up there. And it was like, all right, either it's going to happen or it's not. Like, we're getting. So I would say she finally said yes. She would say she didn't say no loud enough. But so, I'm this. I, tried to join the Navy because I had been, I still had dreams of flight and had been talking to the folks. And they were like, oh, we can make this thing work. But I got permanently disqualified because I had used an inhaler one time. So freshman year in college, while playing football and being a decathlete, I had an upper respiratory infection. And so I was prescribed an inhaler. And this is like 3 or 4 months after my 18th birthday. If it were before my 18th birthday, I would not have had to disclose. But for everyone who's had MEPS issues,
I was actually a military recruiter. Exactly what you're talking. Yeah, I recruited for the Navy.
Yeah, so
Get it.
I'm a full disclosure kind of guy, right? I'm like, I used it this one time, but like, I never had asthma. I never had breathing issues. I was sick while playing 2 sports in season. And so they prescribed me a thing that I used like 3 times.
Yeah.
And so most people were like, I would never have disclosed that. And I was like, I don't want to, whatever. So then I had to have a pulmonary function test with my doctor just so they would take my stuff. And the doctor laughed me out of he was like, your lungs are operating just fine. And then, so we go through the process, and then the Navy is like, go see our doctor. And I go see the doctor, and they're like, why are you here? What? No, this is ludicrous. But then, went up and they came back down and they were like, yeah, nope. I guess because too many people lie about asthma or whatever in the Navy. And they're like, we don't want you to be on a ship and have these issues. Right. And so I'm like, oh, well, that's not going to happen. So I talked to the Army guy and he's like, oh yeah, that's not an issue at all. No worries. And so we go through that process, and I shipped out for basic training the week after my 30th birthday, and went down to Fort Benning and was the old guy in my company, like literally older than all but my senior drill sergeant. And I think I was the oldest non-prior service person, because, we had a good number of E4s who were Air Force or Navy or Marines who had decided to switch and had to come back. And so it was an interesting moment. I went through basic there, and
were there any surprises? Because a lot of people I talked to when they went to basic training, they're like, oh my God, this is what was I doing? You seem like you were pretty educated on like what was going to happen. Was there any like did you get there? Was there any point in time where you're like, oh, what am I thinking?
I mean, it was all kind of dumb. You know what I mean? Like,
I do know what you mean.
I'm like, I'm an adult. Like, it was interesting. Like, it was a lot of manufactured angst.
Yes.
And so it's like nothing we're doing is that hard. And so, some people, I think people always say, oh, back in my day, I was like, I don't know if it was just softer in my moment, but like, there were never, times where it's like, I can't do this. I mean, there are a couple times where, oh, this sucks, or like, man, am I doing? And I'd look over and be like, I'm in 10 times better shape than that person over there. And if they're going to get through this, I am going to get through this. And like, that was, I think, an important part of recognition for me of like, this person's never exercised in their life. I'm going to be just fine. And like, it was just a lot of time wasted. And that was a thing that was, I think, really new for me again, because I've been doing the kind of work where my time was really important, and we didn't just sit around wasting time where, you'd go to, in processing, and you're like sitting around for 3 days as they're like, move from this chair to this chair to this chair, so that they can give you a shot. And they're like, I mean, I could have been doing, and they're like, yeah, and you're going to move from the position of attention to parade rest to the position of attention to look. And you're doing all these weird facing movements to get up, sit down for, hours on end, or standing, it's just,
Oh yeah.
and like, I don't miss that at all.
No. And so I went to OCS at the age of 38. So I get the whole, like, I'm an adult, like at 30, you're an adult. Like there's things that you're scratching your head.
Yeah.
Also probably things that you did not take as seriously as the younger guys took, because again, it's all that manufactured angst.
Manufactured angst. I mean, the kind of wild part for me was, so to graduate, you have to finish your PT test and do this ruck march and like your FTX. And so at the end of my PT test, I have the second highest score of, anybody in my company. I've more than maxed out. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go get some, we don't have PT the next morning. I'm like, I'm gonna go to the training staff or the, whatever, and get some, some stretches just to limber out my calves, because I have really flat feet. I had to get a waiver to join.
Yeah.
And those kind of things. I go in there and they're like, oh, we think you have some stress fractures. And I was like, I absolutely do not have stress fractures. Like, well, we got to x-ray you and you need to be on crutches. And I was like, no, this is dumb, man. And so like, I go in, I've just run a 12-minute 2-mile, which, and now they're like, you've got stress, whatever. So I'm on crutches, and I'm like, go back to the thing. And they're like, well, if you're on crutches, you're not going to be able to do the field exercise and the ruck and graduate. And I'm like, so look at recycle. I was like, I'm not getting recycled. And so I end up talking to my very grizzly first sergeant, right? Like, he is the definition of a first sergeant, the Ranger bad, old guy, this was his last thing. His wife was like, you have deployed enough. You need to be in country for some time. So he's like, how old are you? I was like, I'm 30. He's like, so you're not one of these young kids that don't know anything about it? I was like, no, first sergeant, I'm graduate. Like, I have a date for OCS in 3 weeks, like in 2 weeks. Like, we're going to do holiday block leave, and I'm coming back. He's like, well, you got to get cleared. So I have to go back to the thing. And I talked to physical therapist, and I was like, hey, I'm fine. He's like, yeah, I mean, we can't get you in for x-rays until, whatever day. And you know how the Army is. Everything, they're like, well, if you miss this training, then you have to get recycled.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't do that. He's like, well, then you have to pass the PT test. I was like, cool. And so I'm in my boots and whatever. He's like, yeah, so, just come back tomorrow on your PTs. It's like, no. I will do this right now because I need to go back and not be fooling around with this thing. So like, it was one of those things where it's like, if I had been 18 or 20, I might have got recycled for just silliness. And instead, I'm an adult, and I'm like, no, I'm not doing this dumb thing. Like, you were going to get me through this thing so that I can go and graduate and like move on to OCS in January. And so that was cool, run PT tests in boots on a treadmill and pass, and like go back and do field exercise and get through ruck, and then graduate and do holiday block leave and come back for OCS. And so it was, those kind of things. And you kind of gradually get back to being a human. I think the thing that was hardest for folks was the like NCOs who came from having been out in the force for years and being an adult. You're a E6, E7, and now you're back to being a nobody, and they're like, candidate, wear your ascot, candidate, go to the position of parade rest, and sergeant first class who has to go to parade rest to talk to a sergeant or a staff sergeant. They're like, all right. But I'm like, whatever. I just came from basic training. Like, this is way easy, like, whatever, sure. So got through OCS and then went straight to my BOLC, came home for like 2 weeks, went straight to BOLC. So I literally did Army for basically a year and then came back to regular life. And then,
So infantry?
So my basic branch was transportation.
Okay.
Yep. And I'm a civil affairs officer today. And I did the maneuver captain's career course, which replaced the infantry armor career course and the civil affairs captain's career course.
Okay. So what was it like? It sounds like your whole life you were like, I want to be in the military. Somehow I want to make this happen. So you finally get there and you're doing it for a whole year and then you come back home. How was that transition for you?
I mean, it was cool. It was a little frustrating because in classic Army fashion, I didn't get to do something I wanted to do, right? Like I had a slot for Ranger School and the reserves just wouldn't pay for it. And so it was super frustrating because I was like, all right, I'm already kind of old. I'm in great shape. I've been training. I know this material. Let me get going. And so that first couple of months, I was still hoping against hope that they were going to send me this 60-day school. And because it was this big pause in my normal life of like, all right, I left my job because I'm going to go do this thing and be doing this for a year. Am I going right back to the thing or am I going to do this other thing? And so that was a real moment. And so once Ranger School wasn't going to happen, and I don't know when I'm going to be running 36, minute 5 miles and like being able to do that kind of stuff again, right? Like my knees don't love me the way that they did.
This is true.
10 years ago.
Right.
But so I started working for the Michigan Fitness Foundation. I ran their government affairs, and the CEO at the time was an Army vet. And so JJ Ty was a helicopter pilot who, now is at Ralph Wilson. But, we connected and I got to do really cool things. And because of his veteran space, he also did a bunch of veterans things. So we got involved at the beginning of the Fisher House Detroit conversations and we're working on those kind of things. And so it was cool kind of coming back into regular world-ish, right, of those kind of things. But it was also this kind of unique ramp up, right? So basic training is your classic, you do nothing. You don't have a phone, right? Like you just sit around and fitness, but don't fitness too hard because sit in that space and then go into OCS and it's like, you still don't have all your privileges. So like I can have a little bit of computer, a little bit of phone, but not like a lot. So what do? Fitness, so much fitness, run, pull up, do all those kind of things. Then going into BOLC where it's like, all right, most transportation BOLC, so it's not the most physical thing, but I'm like, I'm training for Ranger School. So I'm up with the, pre-Ranger folks, getting up, running, doing those kind of things, out at Fort Lee in Virginia, getting up and going and running this little hilly course through the battlefield and rucking every week and training and learning the Army stuff. But it was also kind of like being in college in a kind of weird way of like, at home, my wife is at home, but I'm in Virginia by myself. So it's like, I'm playing board games with people as like during the class, during the day, we're just class material, learn all this, all that kind of stuff. And so then come back to, all right, I've been doing Army all day, every day for the past year. And now I'm back to just, once a month. I'm like getting connected in my reserve unit and, finding the right space and understanding. And civil affairs has always been a unique world compared to others because it's so officer heavy and nobody really knows what you do and like training and stuff like that. So it was an interesting bounce back.
So when your wife was here, I'm just curious because I know what my experience was. I'm going to ask you what yours was. Was there a difficulty in figuring out who does what when you got back?
Let's take a quick break.
Hey, listeners, we need your help to keep the Veterans Archives podcast going. We're a nonprofit dedicated to preserving the stories of our nation's heroes, and we provide this service completely free to veterans. Your support helps us record, share, and archive these incredible stories so future generations never forget the sacrifices made for our freedom. Every donation, big or small, makes a difference. Visit veteransarchives.org to contribute today. Help us honor their service by ensuring their voices are heard. And thank you for your support, and thank you to all the veterans who have served our country.
No, it worked out. I think it was fairly smooth because we didn't have children yet.
Right.
And so there are natural Adam tasks that, kind of came up, and she worked really hard while I was away. So she had her normal day. She's a clinical psychologist, so she was working at a clinic here in the city, and then she also built out a private practice. So she was just working all the time, and it was like, all right. I think that there was a lot of getting back to a homeostasis of like, oh, hey, I'm around and we do these kind of things. But I think our separation of who's in charge of what, I think, was always pretty smooth.
Okay.
And then we had kids. So our plan was, I was like, all right, do Army stuff. And then we can start to plan for kid stuff. And so that worked out.
And so your Army's just really been the reserve experience, done the
Yep.
1 weekend a month, 2 weeks in the year.
That is what the commercial says, although I don't know that I've ever had a year where it was 1 weekend a month.
Certainly wasn't my experience.
So, because there are all these things that you have to do, right? So went to the Master Fitness Trainer course, which is a couple of weeks, go to a Captain's Career course, which is 3 weeks, went to Airborne School, which is 3 weeks, went to Air Assault, do and these various training where you're like, all right, well, yeah. And I'm in an airborne unit now. And so, we'll have a number of times where it's instead of a Saturday, Sunday drill, it's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or even a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because we have extra days so that we can get that extra training in and do some of those kind of things. So it's been an interesting thing, as Crystal would say, the commercial would say 1 weekend a month. Crystal would say a quarter of all weekends, and always the good ones.
Right. That was always my experience too. Like, no matter what weekend it was, there was something else I could have been doing, in my civilian life. But that's a sacrifice, though, I guess.
And it is. And I think it's also one of those things that I got a chance to really hone in on as an officer, and to be able to lean in for my soldiers, because I also always worked for places that were very, very supportive of my military service, right? So working for a veteran, working in state government, working for people who value the service versus some of the folks who, they're a server or they're a mechanic, they work hourly, and it is a hindrance to their employer that they're gone for whatever number of days, or the kind of randomness of the shifted days makes a difference, or some of those other kind of things. And so really trying to make sure that we plan to take care of our soldiers in those ways. And when I got in the legislature, trying to work on better levels of protections. I mean, even at the university level where, we'd have students who have to be gone for the military service. And, you're protected when you're on active duty, but you're not protected when you're just on drill. And imagine you get a homework assignment that you needed to that weekend. It's like, well, I was in the woods that weekend, or I was unable to do that because I don't have that time, and trying to work with professors to make them do that. And so, helping my soldiers advocate for themselves and to think through those things.
Yeah. And it could be very difficult. I know very difficult for especially students who are in the Guard or Reserve.
Yeah.
Unless they're going to send you away, then those little chunks are difficult to manage.
Yeah.
So you came back from your training. When did kids come into the picture?
Yeah, so I got back from training in 2016, and our eldest, Lily, was born December 9th of 2017.
Okay.
Yeah, and so she was the scariest, best blessing that we've ever had. So she was 7 weeks early. And as we talk about Joe always being on the worst weekends, Family Day, December 9th, my old unit was in Southfield. And so we're supposed to, because it's Family Day, I had a later report time than normal, but Lily came 7 weeks early on a drill day that I would have normally been at already, getting ready to get out and go. But luckily we had a later report and I was still at home, and because Crystal had a placental rupture. So it was this very scary moment of getting her there and doing all those kind of things. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, all right. And we would have had no reason to be ready or prepared or any of those kind of things because
Yeah.
we weren't expecting her that soon. But, she's all happy and healthy today.
And that's what matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think my son was 8 weeks early, weighed 4 pounds when he was born.
Yeah, that's about what Lily
But,
weighed.
he's a former infantryman and he's a big dude now. So
Yeah, those preemies will balance out. You just gotta get them. And luckily, we had all the stuff. So we joked because I only like Sagittarius women. So Crystal's birthday is December 4th, Lily's is December 9th, and my mom's is December 14th. So she was born on the 9th, a couple days after her mom, and she came home from the hospital on my mom's birthday on the 14th.
oh, that's awesome. Does your mom play that up?
They're pretty close.
Yeah.
They're certainly very close. And when Lily was a little kid, she looked just like my mom. So she's, looking more like her own person. But as a baby, she Lily looked a lot like her. Looked more like her than anybody else.
That's great. And so where are you in your career at this point?
Yeah. So I was working at the Michigan Fitness Foundation and just about to launch my campaign for the state senate.
Okay.
And so we were doing all those kind of things, and I think we'd either just launched. Yeah, we had just launched because I think I launched in November. So we had just launched the campaign for the state senate, and so was just starting to get campaigning, and we were campaigning. And ultimately, I won that election that following October, but it was a really interesting moment of like, all right, I thought I was going to have all this time to like kind of get ready and get stuff going, but it was a mad dash of getting the house ready and getting a room ready and a nursery and painting and like doing all those other kind of things that, we thought we had much more time for. And, we're planning to be, we had our like 10-week checklist, whatever. And it's like, oh, I need a car seat. I don't have a car seat because, you can't bring child home without a car seat, but we hadn't ordered a car seat yet. And it's like, all right, I got to go order a car seat and I got to get a car seat that's going to be here in time for me to pick them up, because we also didn't know exactly when she was going to be able to get released and all those other kind of things. So it was a moment in time that as a parent, you don't think back about just how crazy all of that stuff was.
And you survived it, right?
Yeah.
Well, what is it we say in the military, right? The no plan survives the first shot fired, right? So you can have all the plans you want, but things are going to happen the way they're going to happen.
Yeah, one of the things that helped me get through those early nights when she wouldn't sleep and eat was a good friend of mine who has kids a little bit older than ours was like, look, man, there are a bunch of people way dumber than us that have raised well-adjusted, happy, healthy children. You'll be fine. Just keep doing the best you can,
It doesn't feel like it, though, when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah, no, in the middle of it, you're like, oh, if I don't get this thing done, then they're never going to be. And you're like, There's somebody who is chain smoking with their kid, who doesn't care half as much as you do, who's going to raise a happy, healthy child. For us, it is like, just don't screw them up. Just don't screw them up. Give them the things that they need and try. And as long as you're trying, you'll be great.
Yeah, that should be a motto somewhere. Just don't screw them up.
I mean,
But it's true. Like, in that scary point where they like hand you the baby at the hospital and you leave and you're like, well, wait a minute, no one's coming with us. We're on our own. Like, we just got to figure this thing out. And that's terrifying. At least it was for me.
Yeah, I mean, well, we had a very different experience because we got to spend, so much time with that NICU nurse who was a professional, right? So like Lily, she taught us how to, use a bottle and like actuate her mouth so that she could, feed. So, doing all of these kind of things with someone who does this all day, every day. And it was I'm glad that we learned. I would not have repeated the process if given the alternative. So AJ was a lot smoother in his, just planned C-section, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So when was he born?
He was born November 2nd, 2020. So literally the day before President Biden got elected. We were in the hospital, height of COVID, no visitors, in a mask. He's a day old. And I got called from the hospital down to what was the TCF Center, used to be Cobo, is now Huntington Place, by the Biden team. And they were like, hey, can you come down? And I'm looking at Crystal. because I got sick one of the days that Lily was in the hospital, and I went home and slept in our bed for like a day. And Crystal, when we came in, because it's COVID, she was like, no matter what, you aren't leaving without us. So we come in, the two of us were leaving, the three of us, no pauses, no break.
Right.
And so I get this call, and I'm looking at her, and she's like, he's on the way. And so, I went down to manage that crisis as folks were banging on the glass, say stop, kind of doing all these other kind of things. And so it was this kind of really interesting moment in time for us, in that he had just been born, and like my work life hadn't stopped at all.
Right.
And because I've always been a huge advocate for paternity leave and all those kind of things. And so my wife and I have always kind of taken it in opposite directions. So she took more at the beginning, I took more at the end. So, she's off a week at the beginning. And then as she's starting to go back, that first day that she's working, I've got a day of the kid. And then 2 days, 3 days. And so it would bounce out, so we'd extend our time as much as possible.
Okay. Now, when he was born, are you still in the Senate then?
Yeah, I was still in the legislature when he was born. Yep.
Okay. And so what happens after your time in the legislature?
So after I left the legislature, I ran the Michigan Veterans Affairs Agency. And so it was this amazing opportunity to crisscross the state and help service members get the benefits that they were entitled to that often were not getting. Right. So, the first week, the first person who I got a chance to work with over at the Dingle VA was a World War II vet from West Virginia who had not collected his benefits till he was in his early 90s, and he was in his late 90s. Right. And when he got back from the Pacific, they were not supportive of him being black, and they want to take off uniform, whatever. And so he got a good job at Ford, and he said, forget about it. And at some point his daughter was like, hey, Dad, you served in the war, right? And this is somebody who like was there when they like did stuff, right? Like he wasn't like, and not to, challenge anyone's service. And, I think everybody who raised their right hand should say they're a veteran, they did the service, whatever.
Right.
But this is a guy who was on a ship with MacArthur and like in places as they are liberating and doing those kind of things. And so was like there and enlisted in the Navy, didn't get drafted, enlisted because he saw Pearl Harbor and heard FDR on the radio and was like, I'm going to do this for my country. And so you're like, wow. And, 70 years later, he starts collecting his benefit. Like it was a wild experience, listening to him talk about his time in the Navy, what it was like being black in the Navy in the 40s, growing up, living in West Virginia and like all these kind of things. And you're like, well, what? How did you? And it was people like that from all different generations that I got a chance to talk to, women who served, who fought, who did 10, 15 years and didn't consider themselves veterans. And you're like, lady, you were in the Air Force for 15 years. It's like, yeah, but I didn't see combat and I didn't. And you're like, that's not what a veteran is. Like, that's not
right.
That you just didn't get deployed to, like you deployed, you didn't get deployed in this thing. You don't get to determine what your job is or where you're going to go. A lot of that is happenstance. So, we worked with a guy who was a Vietnam era veteran,
right,
who was never in Vietnam. And so he had some challenges, but he saw combat in like South Korea. And you're like, wait, what? And, you talk to all these people who have these like really unique stories. So like when I first started the job, I went up to the Jacob Eddy Veterans Home, literally my first week in the job. So went up to the UP in January. We're talking to a guy in a wheelchair, old Vietnam era vet, and we're talking, and he's like, oh, who are you? And I was like, oh, I'm whatever. He was like, well, did you serve? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm in the reserves. He's like, well, he's like, well, do you jump? And I was like, yeah, I've got. He's like, well, how many jumps do you have? And I was like, I don't know, I have like 9. He's like, oh, I used to jump too, yada, yada, yada. It's like, well, how many do you have? He's like, I don't know, on the books, 267, but I probably had 300 and something. And you're like, what?
That's a lot of jumps.
You're like, and even if, even if he's exaggerating some of the stuff, you like start to talk to him, and he's like a guy who was in a unit that was working with special ops and like doing those kind of things. And, all of these people have a story that they want to tell if you're willing to listen. And that was one of the coolest things about that role was I got a chance to not just tell people's story and listen to it, but to amplify them and give them platforms to do that. So we ran a campaign saying I'm a veteran, where we were trying to get people to talk about being a veteran who maybe didn't necessarily think about it. So, a guy who serves during Vietnam is in combat, but not in Vietnam. He had a little bit of consternation about calling himself a Vietnam vet. He would say he was a Vietnam era vet. And we're like, bro, you are really splitting hairs in this thing. Because and I think so much of the military culture is gatekeeping or badge keeping or, whatever the case may be. And so I think I really took as my role to say, look, less than 1% of people in this country will raise their right hand and say, hey, send me. You don't have a lot of control about where you're sent. So I had an uncle who served during Vietnam, got drafted. His buddies went to Vietnam. He went to Hawaii because he could type and had, issues managing that because his friends died while he was in paradise. And it's understanding that you don't control that. And that is not the line. The line is, did you say, hey, send me? Because you could have gotten sent or you could not have gotten sent. But at the football game, stand up,
Right.
And but even more than that, recognize that you are entitled to something because you earned it, not because you need it. And so my uncle who passed just a couple of years ago was a Korean War vet and got out of the Army because they wouldn't promote him to sergeant unless he re-upped. And he was like, promote me and then we'll talk about it.
Right.
But, he never really talked about his military service until I joined the military. And, all he would tell anybody else was he was 100 miles from Elvis or something, when they were both in Germany. And we had this generation of people who didn't talk to their children, who never knew, who never understood, who never got a chance to see or hear. And as a result, at some point their kids wake up and they're like, hey, Mom, you were in the military, right? I saw this thing that says that you're entitled to. And people are like, yeah, but I don't need that. It's like, that's not what this is about. You earned this and you should get it. So the same way you get your tax return, some people don't need that $100, that $1,000, that $5,000, whatever your tax return is, they still want it.
Yeah.
But we're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars of veterans benefits that people leave on the table because they feel like they don't need it. And that was the thing that we really had to push back against and engage with and work with folks on and getting people to really think about themselves differently, whether they got put out because they were LGBTQ or because, they were dealing with mental health issues at a time where they served and we didn't think about mental health issues.
Right.
And so we're doing discharge, eligible, stuff and upgrades and recognizing that folks, you read books about World War I and World War II and you're like, that dude's a coward. They had shell shock. And you look at that book in 2020 and you're like, this person had PTSD.
Right.
They had a personality disorder. They had this, they were dealing with this trauma. And so that person who, we look at and we're like, oh, well, they were this troublemaker, this problem. It's like, no, they broke them. So Jason Kander, who was the Secretary of State of Missouri and is a big veteran advocate and those kind of things in a book he wrote, he talks about an experience he had going to the VA and talking to another guy and talking about, them taking advantage of benefits, even though they could afford not to, and him really grappling with that as an idea. And the dude is like, the Navy got a well-adjusted, the other guy's son was like, got a well-adjusted, well-mannered 20-year-old. And they gave me back this little shit, right? They broke me.
Yeah.
They need to fix it. And I think it's really understanding that part of the promise, right? Like the part of the military and, our government is like, we'll protect you, but you're always going to look out for us.
Yeah. Well, I think like to me, the argument, like at least from my perspective, is that, when we, for instance, Iraq's a great example. When we calculated what the cost was to go to Iraq, we calculated the cost. Like it's going to cost this much to have these many bullets and this many bombs and do all of this stuff. We never calculated the cost of bringing people back home, right? That's never part of the calculus when we send young men and women off to war. That's part of it. The other part of it too is something that you talked about, and this is what we talk about with veterans, because many veterans are like, well, you don't want to hear my story, I got nothing to say. Is that whether you were a combat veteran or not, whatever it was that you did allowed other people to do their job, right? Now, if everyone went to combat, no one would get paid. There would be no logistics. I could go on and on and on about the things that wouldn't happen. So there have to be people that don't go to combat in order for the people that do go to combat to do their job. Yeah. And that's the importance of having raised your right hand and signed on the dotted line.
And I think you see that in Ukraine. You saw that in the early invasion with the Russians. The Russian logistics are what lost. And in every war that we've ever won, we won because of logistical support. And that's why the combat arms portion is such a small amount of the military compared to all the other things going on.
Right.
And, I think that is the thing that we've got to continue to get folks to understand is this is not a thing of like, I'm more of a cool guy. I'm more of a, whatever. It's like, all right, man, you're in Delta Force. You are the coolest of the cool guys.
Right.
That doesn't mean that that person who is a finance private isn't just as important, because if they don't approve those things, you don't have any of the tools, the mechanisms you need to be successful. And so it is about making sure that we are doing the work to make those things work, right? Like I have a really good friend who I went to basic and OCS with, who's a Green Beret today. And like, I'm super proud of him. That's the cool, that's amazing. He's super cool. And that person that we went to basic and OCS with, who is a logistician, who's a quartermaster, and is just in the funeral space, right? Like in mortuary services, right? Like they're just as important in these spaces, but there's not the badge or the tab or the thing. And when you retire and say, hey, I took care of, I shot Osama bin Laden in the face versus I brought back home all these people we lost, right? Like we've got to recognize the value in both of those things. Yes. The same way we recognize the value in people who got discharged because they were gay. Or, served in a time where being a woman didn't allow them to get promoted and to do some kind of things, and recognize that us telling our stories helps other people be able to do more than they could in that space. So my grandfather, for example, was a little fairer than I am, and he got accepted into the Army Air Corps' early pilots program. And then they realized he was black and not white. And they were like, no, you're actually not accepted into this thing. And like, it's those kind of stories where you're like, that frames a lot of why families are willing to let their children join the military or not join the military, or to do some of these kind of things. And so the more that we talk about the experiences that we had, it allows people to make good decisions and to be able to be involved in spaces that they would otherwise not have been.
Absolutely. And every one of these stories is important. You talked about female veterans. I can't tell you how many times I've been at functions where people assume that the husband was the veteran.
Oh, always.
It's not the case, right?
Always.
They always assume it's the guy. And those, you see those things happen, quite frequently. And I think, yes, by sharing our stories, people definitely get the message. So.
And start to understand what to look for in these things and understand it.
Right.
And one of the things that I always talked about when I was running the agency is when you think about providing a service, you have a target demographic. And for most veterans programming, you're thinking about a white guy who served in Vietnam. Yeah. Like that is what people are imagining with their VFW hat on, or, American Legion, or, whatever. And that's super limiting to all the other groups of people, right? Like nobody thinks about Korean War vets, right? Like no one. And they are a demographic that we, are losing, but some of them are still around, right? Like the last of our World War II vets are really kicking around right now. And we're starting to really lose those Korean War vets, but we don't talk about them. We don't honor them. We don't understand them because there are no great movies about them. There are no these great stories. Like it's catching them and getting them to engage. They don't have these big organizations that you have from these other places.
Right, absolutely. And you know, we've interviewed actually quite a few Korean War vets and World War II vets, and those people that fell in between, like Korea and Vietnam. So, you know, all those veterans are out there. I want to go back to female veterans for just a second, because there was someone who worked, I want to say she worked like the Saginaw VA, but I think she works at NVAA. But she does an exercise in crowds where she'll have people close their eyes and say, you know, have them imagine a veteran. And then she'll say, now open your eyes. Does that person look like me? And 90% of the time it's like, no, it's a middle-aged white dude, right? With PTSD. That's a veteran. So yeah, I think it is important. Veterans are all of us. And it's amazing the people you meet who you don't know are veterans, and you learn that they are.
100%, right? Like you see them in spaces and time and doing those kind of things. And even how they're portrayed in like the media has changed, right? So you look at the beginning of the Rambo series, and he's this, you know, vagrant just trying to get home, and like they do that. Or you look at Karate, you know, the original Karate Kid, and now we would look at those people and be like, oh, they obviously have PTSD. Right? Like they obviously have PTSD, and the way that we interact with those service members is very different. So I was at a Jewish veterans event, and we were just talking about this thing, and you know, these Vietnam vets just started randomly hugging me, and it was kind of, you know, it's kind of a weird thing, but it's like they were just grateful that we were acknowledging their service and thanking them and recognizing how hard it must have been to have come home and to dealt with those kind of things, and to be seen in a way that they were just not typically seen before. Yeah.
So now, how long were you at the MVA?
About a year, a little over a year.
All right. Sounds like it was a very fulfilling year.
Yeah, it was a great time. You know, I left to make another attempt at the congressional run. It didn't work out the way I had hoped, but it was a really amazing opportunity to serve folks. I got to go to, you know, crisscross the whole state and work with people, you know, just the best folks, right? Like working for veterans and with veterans is probably the best job you can get, aside from if there was some similar puppy type thing, right? Like people like veterans, right? Like they want to be supportive,
right?
And you see people who earned it, and you want to help them.
Yeah. So you left the MVAA, you made another run. I think that's right around the time that we met the first time. And then, so what happened after all of that?
Yeah, so then I was on the faculty at Wayne State throughout that time, and was trying to figure out the whole congressional thing, and it did not go the way I had hoped. And so, you know, the last year I've just been figuring all those kind of things out, launched a campaign for Secretary of State, and then those things kind of move. And so now running for re-election back to the state Senate, and so excited about the opportunity to go back and be successful and do work as I was able to do in the legislature.
So it'd be kind of cool for you to go back after being absent for several years. So
and hopefully in the majority, you know, and to be able to get some of the things done. And so I got the chance to learn a lot of things working in the administration and doing some of those spaces, and seeing how there are some things that we can do, you know, as we talk about the definition of a veteran, right? So I often tell people we should be using football rules, right? So if you're at the football game and they're like, hey, well, the veterans, please stand up. It's like, did you serve? Yep. Raise your hand. Versus too often we are using, are you a protected veteran? Which is, you know, if we compare that to disability, it's like, do you have a disability or are you on SSI disability, right? Like that's a big difference between those things. And so it's also super limiting for people who are actively serving, right? And so if you're on active duty and have, you know, never been out, you're not a veteran. But most people are really asking, have you served in the military? And that's what we really need to get on, you know, job applications, on some of those kind of things. And so while running the veteran-friendly employer program, veteran-friendly schools, it was trying to get people into a space where we're saying, have you served, not are you a veteran? Because that is a charged term for so many folks. And being able to go back to the legislature and work on those issues. So we did a lot of licensing and a lot of things. So when you came off active duty, you know, the skills that you learned while serving, you could actually put immediately to bear. And also that your spouses, as you switch states, that their licensing would continue. So, my wife, for example, the reason active duty would have been really difficult for her is because she's a clinical psychologist and it takes a lot of time to get licensed in one state. And at the time, she'd had to start over. And so that's why you see so many folks stop working. So I have a really good friend whose wife was a pharmacist. And, when they moved, she'd have to take the licensure exam in every different state, or in some states she can practice. And so it's just making those kind of things work better for our military families.
Yeah. Well, and as the program manager at a utility here in Michigan before my retirement, one of the things that we worked on was when you look at self-identification, right? When you look at the veteran self-identification, first of all, a lawyer wrote that because the common man cannot understand what they're asking.
Yep.
But we finally got Consumers Energy to put on that form, have you served? None of the above pertain to me, but I served. And I think that gives you a good idea of how many veterans are serving. But I like the idea of, let's not ask people who are veterans anymore. Let's just ask them if they served.
Yeah.
Did you serve? And then let's go from there.
And that gets you so far, right? Like my uncle, who was a Korean War vet, who, got some of those kind of things, sometimes say yes, sometimes say no.
Yeah.
Right. And it's those kind of folks, right? Like we had a bunch of, women veterans who routinely would say no to veteran, but if you said, did you serve? We're saying yes. And these are people who had a whole career.
Yeah.
Or people who were like, well, I didn't retire. I just did my 5 years. And you're like, yeah, but that's enough, my guy.
Yeah. You raised your hand, you signed a blank check. That's all good. So what's next, Adam? I mean,
yeah.
What's the next chapter? You're a young guy. So.
Yeah, I mean, well, God willing, I'll make major in the next year or so. I'm still jumping out of perfectly good airplanes. I should get the weather's nice. I'll get an exit here in March.
Awesome.
And so, just keep trying to do those things. Obviously, really looking forward to being able to go back to the legislature and keep working on the things that we're doing. And, it's going to be a really interesting set of years. I think we're really figuring out what the military looks like over the coming years. And there's a big shift, I think, as you start talking about going from being a captain to being a major and like what kind of things I'll be tasked with doing. And so, I'm excited about my opportunities to go serve. I get a chance to go back to JRTC later this year. So another 28 days in Louisiana for fun.
Nice.
Yeah,
Louisiana's awful hot.
Yeah, it's gonna be it's gonna be in the hot season too. So
Yeah, definitely. Well, we've covered a lot in the last hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to talk about?
Not that I can think of.
Okay.
I think it was,
Well, then I got one last question for you. And, I look over your lifetime of service, your family's lifetime of service. Seems like it's just part of your DNA. For someone listening to this story 100 years from now, when neither one of us are here, what message would you want to leave with them?
What's message? I mean, I think when I think about me and what it's about trying to build stuff, right? And to do all the things. And so I think I've always been trying to lay a strong foundation, which is what I think my parents gave me from top to bottom, and make sure that we leave it better than we got it. And so much of that is in supporting the institutions and making those things happen, right? So I've always looked at my service as an opportunity to support people. And so, running the Veterans Affairs Agency and my time in the legislature, it's how do I make the lives of people who say send me better? And that, I think, is what I hope people will be able to say, is that, in 100 years, they'll be able to say that because I was here, it's easier to be a military spouse, that we do a better job taking care of you while you're serving and after your service is done, and that we make sure that we ensure that people who are actively serving have the tools, the support, and the training that they need to be successful. Because I think too often we ask people to go out and do things that they're not trained for, because we wanted to buy some cool thing, and we should be investing more in people. And so doing everything we can to make that shift, that we actually invested in our people and make sure that they had the training and the things necessary to be successful and save their lives, right? Like we've seen mortality rates plummet in combat because we had tactical first aid, right? And it was like, hey, you carry a tourniquet, you have you have your IFAC, you've got these kind of things. But it's only as good as the training that you have, right? Like my 5-year-old, the week after he was born, stopped breathing.
Oh.
And so I had to do CPR on him and then like literally take him to the hospital and do all those kind of things. But he was fine because I knew how to do it. I was a volunteer firefighter. We practiced those kind of things, right? Like I've gotten that kind of training in the military. And so it's not always the direct, hey, what does this thing do? It is we practice being able to respond when a thing happens. And when stuff happens in life, you're able to respond. And I think that's what I want people to remember is, so my whole life training to be useful, and God willing, I'll get those opportunities to do so.
Yeah, I like it. Well, thanks for taking time out of your busy morning to talk with us, and good luck with everything. And I look forward to seeing great things.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Veterans Archives podcast. We truly appreciate you taking the time to listen and honor the incredible stories of our nation's heroes. Don't forget, you can catch us every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern on Wreaths Across America Radio, or stream past episodes anytime on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and as I've said before, any place you can find a podcast, you can find the Veterans Archives podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share our content on YouTube and Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and across all social media. Every share helps us reach more people and preserve more stories. The Veterans Archives podcast is a nonprofit initiative, and our mission is simple: to give veterans a voice and ensure their stories are never forgotten. This service is completely free for veterans because their sacrifices deserve to be recognized and remembered. You want to help? Follow us, spread the word, and if you know a veteran with a story to tell, send them our way. Visit us at veteransarchives.org to learn more about how you can get involved. Thanks again for tuning in, and most importantly, thank you to all the veterans and their families for their service and sacrifice. Until next time, take care, and we will see you on the next episode of the Veterans Archives podcast.